while we're waiting, Sonny and I met with someone from the base today, Christy Sitten. She's the office of the commander. Basically, they have some grants for facilities in cities that are around bases around the country. So it's a 50-50 grant. So we're working on a project list to send to her for things that we could possibly get. So obviously things like recreation improvements, parking improvements, that sort of thing. Maybe we can put something forward. The trick to it is showing how it's valuable to people that work on the base. How many people from the base actually go to this facility, use the facility, et cetera, something this base doesn't have. So we're looking at that list to see what we can come up with. I'm sure it's very competitive, of course. It's $50 million for nationwide applications, but they funded things like recs, pools, YMCAs before, so.
I'm thinking of City Center, Matthew.
Yeah, really.
Right,
It's only 50 million. That's not enough to hardly help.
right.
We only need half of it.
Yeah.
Well, I think Sonny was just Sonny's muted. I think what he's trying to say, we were talking about some of the actual facilities in the park of City Center. Maybe the playground feature, maybe some of that we can apply. It's usually to get smaller monies than it is big monies for grant applications anyway. Couldn't hurt.
It's one thing I do miss from Yuma is the my house was right in the overflight path of the Marine base there. Technically in a sound corridor that shouldn't have had residential homes in it. And we had Harriers and helicopters and stuff flying right over, shaking things. And now I'm in the Scottsdale Municipal Airport flight path, and it's so much quieter with those jets.
Little bit different. I was telling somebody, my dad worked at Lockheed in Marietta, Georgia when I was a kid. And he would take me there, and I've been up inside a Blackbird before. I've been in a Stealth, obviously pre 9/11, and got to see all that stuff and loved that when I was a kid. And now, of course, you can't get anywhere near any of that stuff, but pretty cool back then.
Yeah, when I was in the Air Force, I got used to aircraft engine noises because we had almost 40 C5s stationed there at Dover Air Force Base, and they were constantly doing maintenance and doing engine runs, and you running those C5 engines all night long, and you get used to it.
Get used to that steady hum.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Terry, can you send Ann a news link?
Yeah.
In fact, why don't you send it to Ann and Paul and Lisa? I'll send all three of them a new link.
Tom, you're doing your best Wally Campbell right now.
I'm doing my best Wally Campbell because I'm eating.
Yeah, you
Can
need
you hear
to
me,
sit up a little
Tom?
straighter, Tom.
What's
Say the
that?
top of your head.
That's
Yeah,
how
I've got
hard I
forehead
worked.
only.
That's how I worked and
You've been ground down. Is that what you're saying?
beat down.
There we go.
Is that better? Yeah. Well, we got somebody we just admitted here.
Good, Paul.
Vice Mayor's here. All right.
Way to be on time, Mr. Faith.
Okay, now we have, I know we have Ann trying to log in, so at least we'll be up to 6. We'll get started.
Tom, you might be interested to know,
What's that, Sonny?
Dick Lattin introduced you to his granddaughter that won the women's category for the 1 mile last year.
Did she win again?
She won again. She ran 6:29.
Wow. That's amazing. Oh, there she comes. All right,
Sorry, missed that one.
no problem.
And on my
We don't
email
have-
all afternoon too. I never saw it. Anyway.
So the only one we're missing is Lisa, so we're gonna go ahead and get started at this point. The purpose of this meeting, I do appreciate the fact that you're giving up some of your early evening hours here to be here. We have issues around the city manager position that we need to work on and hopefully get resolved. And this is an effort to get that process started. I want to go through the revised job description for the city manager, two different evaluation instruments that we have, and a draft of some goals for the city manager so that we can have them on the agenda at our regular meeting, at which it would be, the agenda item will be to adopt a new job description. So we can get your input this afternoon on the job description to see if there's anything in it that you don't like or anything that you want to add to the job description. We'll try to get that to the point where we can adopt it at our next meeting. In terms of the evaluation, we need to have a form, and we need to discuss any issues we might have with these two potential forms. I happen to favor one of the forms over the other, but even in that form, there are some things that I would like to see changed. So I want to go through that with you guys. And then the goals, the idea would be to look at these goals now and with an eye towards adopting the actual goals as part of the budget process each year. So as part of reviewing the operations of the city and the budget, the budget that we think we're going to have to spend for the next year, to adopt city manager goals that are consistent with that budget. These list of goals that you've got are consistent with the kinds of goals that we used to adopt for Darrell. These are a bit more lengthy in the sense that there's a few more of them than what was generally put together for Darrell. We typically kept his to 4 or 5, but this gives you at least an idea of the kinds of things that I have been discussing and that Matthew has been looking at over the last several months. And then once we get through that, then I want to discuss the question of whether we're prepared to change the designation of interim city manager to just city manager for Matthew. And if the council is ready to consider that, I would like to have the authority to work with Joe in putting together a contract for Matthew that would be brought back to the council for review and approval at its next meeting. So those are the topics for discussion this evening. When we get to the issue of interim versus permanent city manager, we have provision for executive session if someone on the council, feels that we should use the executive session as a way to discuss some of the issues that surround that decision. Matthew has been noticed for the executive session, so we're in a position where we can do that if the council wishes to do it. Any questions about what we're trying to get accomplished tonight? Okay, let's get started then with the job description. You can see that what the description was and how it's been modified. I don't know is there anyone who would like to go through it paragraph by paragraph? I just want to talk about the changes. What's your pleasure?
I might tell you, as you look at these, you'll notice the parts that are highlighted are things that I suggested that we add. I had Susan reach out to cities around the state to get multiple city managers' job descriptions. That's for additions that these came from other city documents that I added, things I thought that we were missing, maybe things we could word better. So just so you're aware of that. For me, I use yellow for highlights and red for deletions. So certainly open to questions if there are any on any of those reasons why.
Questions or comments from the council? Is this
Can you,
is
what was the
modified?
date you sent that? What was the date you sent that, Matthew? I'm just trying to find, I'm trying to pull it up.
Last Thursday.
Last Thursday.
Yes,
Okay. I know I have it. I just couldn't find it.
Sure, it's in the packet online as well, but yes, ma'am, last
right.
Thursday afternoon.
Got it.
You got it? There's also a copy of it in the actual notice for this meeting for tonight in the agenda packet. But you're not muted.
Which
You are
somehow I
muted.
don't have. So I'm going to go back to this one. Oops. That was oops. Lucky I'm not in my car.
And I just sent it to you.
Tom, I have a question for you.
Yes, Councilor Romack.
Thank you. Back when Bill Stevens left, I understood that Matthew was coming in as an interim, which is great, but that we were going to start a process of advertising for a new city manager. What happened to that plan, and how did that get short-stopped?
I guess I don't recall the plan being quite the way you described it.
Okay.
As I understood it, and I thought as we discussed, we were going to take a look at Matthew in terms of his job performance as interim. And then at the point after we had 60 or 90 days of experience with his capabilities and what he was getting done, then we would look at the question of, do we want to go out for a search for a new city manager, or do we want to retain Matthew as in that position and forego the search? And I think that's the position we're at right now, of making the decision of, are we ready to simply offer the job to Matthew based upon what he has done thus far, or do we want to go out and take the time and the effort to perform a search?
If I'd like to continue, I was on that search committee before, and that's very time consuming, and it's a very difficult, not difficult process, but time consuming, and a process that is one to be avoided if at all possible, I think. And Matthew has been with us now for some time, and I think he's proved himself quite ably. So I would hope that we're able to continue down this path.
Well, I think that's why, that the idea was that we have more knowledge and information about Matthew today than we will ever have about a candidate who applies for the job through a search. And if you looked at Matthew's resume, his resume would clearly get him in the door as part of a search anyway. He went through an in-depth search to be hired as a assistant city manager. So we have an opportunity to forego some of the time-consuming nature of what we did before, and maybe make a decision based on better information anyway. So that's something we'll talk about when we get through this first part of these other administrative pieces. So at this point, is there anything in this job description that you think needs to be changed, or is there something that's been missed in here that you think we need to add to the job description for the city manager for us? Councilman Donahue.
Actually, my only question is, since realistically, we're looking back as far as Daryl, and I wasn't here when Daryl was, how much has changed of this job description that Daryl had? I don't know.
Well, the things that are in here in yellow have changed.
Yeah.
The remainder of this document, I think, is the same or very, very consistent with the way it existed at the time Daryl was here.
The job description I'm looking at doesn't have yellow. The evaluation does, but the one I'm looking at.
Somebody sent you where did you get the one that you got?
This is the one that I pulled up from Matthew. Or no, oh, sorry, never mind.
It's
All right.
yellow.
Yeah, I've got another one here. Let me pull that up. All right.
It starts on page 2. There's yellow is where the
Okay.
first yellow I think is mine, but.
Gotcha.
So
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it is, as you can see, there are some things that have been added in, but the majority of this is the same as it has been for quite some time. Councilor Stossel, did you have a question earlier? I want to make a comment.
No, I didn't. I don't have a question. I'm fine with the job description as it's presented. I had a comment sort of relative to poor council member Donahue's challenges. And that just goes to the scheduling of the meeting. And I've expressed this concern before. I'll express it again. I don't think it's fair or appropriate for us to be scheduling a meeting on Tuesday afternoon that we're going to have on Wednesday evening, because I think most of us don't check our emails that regularly. And I'm sure that's probably what happened to Ann. And I just happened to be lucky and checked my email yesterday afternoon. So I knew it was going to be here, but I think we need to be more considerate of the council's time. And I personally don't think we should schedule a meeting without giving us at least a weekend, so we have time to read the material before we have the meeting. So anyway, I just make that plug. Very disappointed in how we scheduled the meeting. We asked for the meeting to be scheduled 6 weeks ago, and we waited 6 weeks to do anything, and then we scheduled one in 24 hours.
Duly noted. It was not intended to not provide notice that, and while I didn't schedule a meeting with you, I will make sure that as we go forward in the future that we allow time when we have it, and I think in this case we could have allowed time. So I apologize on behalf of the council, to all the council members, for a lack of notice. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Usually one of the staff members calls us also to remind us that we have a meeting coming up. I kind of like that system. I've actually complimented her even when she was bothering me and I knew there was a meeting going on, because it's nice to have somebody double check and make sure the staff is keeping me in the loop and knows that I know there's a meeting set. So maybe we need to make sure that gets done in the future, the phone call at least.
And we certainly could, send out a phone call, do a phone call, or send out text messages to everybody.
Yeah, usually it's when I get an email and I don't respond back to it or something. She'll say, "Hey, I've sent you an email. I didn't hear back from you, but I'm now calling you to make sure you got it and you're doing it." So
I would vote for text as an alert. That would have been, I literally was on my email when I got the text from you guys going, "Where are you?" So I hadn't even seen it. It wasn't unread or anything, but anyway, I'd go for text as a reminder, if that's true.
And that would be an efficient way for the city clerk or her office to get a hold of everybody, would be to send out a group text as a reminder. Are you nodding your head yes, Ms. Roth?
Yes, sir, I am. I will do that.
Okay, good. All righty. Okay, any further input on this job description? All right, hearing none, the job description is going to come back to you at our regularly scheduled meeting for formal adoption, so that we have it adopted for, for time, for purposes going forward. Next item is a consideration of the evaluation forms. Of the two forms, the form number 1, which is the one that has the fillable PDF format. That form is the form, I believe, that we used consistently for Daryl. Either that form or something very similar to it.
That's correct, sir. That's the 2016 form.
Yeah, I personally prefer that form. I think section 1, the questions that are in section 1, numbers 1 through 7, are questions that can be answered by the council. They're designed and the way that they're set up and explained in terms of what the different ratings mean. There are information that the council should be able to weigh in on. I don't particularly like section 2, and would prefer that we change section 2. Well, the way that we used it with the way that I used it with Daryl, the way the council communicated with Daryl using that section 2 was to basically wrap the goals into those objectives, I think it's called in that section. And those we can set as a council, again, as part of this, as part of our budgeting process. We never really used the section on section 3, which is about future growth and development and setting up a development action plan for weaknesses. To be brutally honest, Daryl never really wanted to talk about weaknesses at all. And when the few times when I brought up weaknesses with Daryl, it was a difficult conversation. So I never found that section to be particularly helpful, and we have never used it in the time that I've been mayor. And I would just suggest that it be dropped. And if we get to the point where we need to go through and have a development action plan for the city manager is probably in the process of leaving his job. That would be my suspicion. And if he's not leaving his job and it's something that the council desires to devote energy in terms of trying to fix problems with what the city manager is doing, we can always add a section into this evaluation to cover that. But I just don't think it's something that on a regular basis, we would try to do that every year, if there wasn't some sort of identified problem. So my preference would be to see us use this, use that general format and then, modify it so that in section 2, that's really designed for a statement of goals that we would evaluate in terms of how well the city manager is able to accomplish the goals. And then we eliminate section 3 unless there's some need for it in a particular instance. So that's my opinion of it. For what it's worth, I'd like to hear from anyone else, and including Matthew, because you've looked at the forms and I think you have an opinion on which one you would prefer being evaluated on.
Yes, sir, I do. I'm looking at the forms. So the form we're looking at now, as the mayor said, was Daryl's form. That's 2016. Obviously, we used a blank one. We can send you completed ones if you'd like for comparison to see how they worked out. You were also sent the one for 2019 that was Bill's. In my opinion, the 2019 form is much more for a department head than it is for a city manager. Just my honest opinion. I like the 2016 form much better. And I do like having goals on there. Personally, I like to have metrics to meet to say either it was done, it wasn't done. Obviously, if there's extenuating circumstances, that's something that I would like to see. As far as sections 2 and sections 3, If I don't have a problem with section 3, if mayor and council would like to include that. I understand that, especially as a young manager, I'd like to stay with you guys long term. So I don't mind seeing ways that you think that I can grow and develop in the future. Honestly, I appreciate the comments. I don't know what you're expecting from me a lot of times if you don't tell me. So please, I welcome any comments that you might have.
Comments from the council? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mayor. In years past, and filling out these forms and stuff, I think I always left some blanks or put some generalities in there. And I think that section 3, I kind of left blank, but every once in a while something would pop up with a weakness that, as I saw it, such as with Daryl and his tendency to be overprotective of the council during council meetings from the public. So, little things like that.
He did get testy, didn't he?
Yeah, he would become very protective of us for some reason, and I didn't like that. But that's about the only thing I'd ever put down. But leaving it in just in case. But I don't think we have an obligation to fill out every blank in here, or if we, maybe we fill it out and just say good and just leave it at that, or excellent. So I'm not sure there's a reason to cut that section 3 out, but
yeah, we can leave it in so long as you understand that in most instances I probably am not gonna put anything in there. But
yeah, I'm not either. But.
Okay, Councilman Donahue.
I concur what Matthew said, and that was my feedback way back, is that I think that the previous one was completely department head. There's no way I could have evaluated Bill even on any of those things. So this is way better. So just my 2 cents, what it's worth, 2 cents.
2 cents. All right, Councilman Stossy.
This will be worth 0. I'm fine with the
A race to the bottom.
I'm fine with the form. I'm fine with taking out section 3. In my experience doing reviews with forms like this, basically the stuff you're going to want the city manager to work on is going to come out in the comments and the stuff in section 1 anyway. I mean, that's where we would be probably giving feedback if there was something we thought should be worked on. So I'm fine with it that way. I think to me, the most important thing is that when we do the review process, that we as a city council do not individually fill out the form and then give him 7 reviews, but that instead we collectively fill out one form that represents the feedback of the council, and that he's getting 1 review and not 7.
If you look at the procedure that's in that evaluation form, each council member fills out the form and comes up with a ranking of the 4 or 5 category. Within the categories, a ranking of exceptional or adequate or inadequate, and those have a number value, and then those numbers are converted into a council evaluation that is the average of all the numbers. So maybe it comes out at a 3.8 or 4.2 or whatever for each category, and then council meets as a council and goes over that summarized number that comes up. So each question will have a ranking number that's the numerical average from the council, and then the council decides if they want to modify that. And they may decide that, well, it came out higher than what we thought or lower than what we thought. And so, but then essentially you convert those 7 individual evaluations are converted into one evaluation from the council. There are individual, to the extent there are comments made by people, those individual comments will show up in the report so that the city manager knows who has made the comment, so that if there's any further discussion that should happen, it can happen. And then that overall one evaluation form is then presented to the city manager and reviewed with the city manager as one evaluation. So not 7 individual ones.
But my concern would be the way that process works is that if I'm really happy with Matthew on a particular subject and I give him a high grade and some wonderful feedback comments, and Ann thinks he's terrible on the same subject, then basically he gets my feedback and Ann's feedback. And then he doesn't know what we collectively really think. And I think we need to hash that out amongst ourselves.
Collectively, let's just say that you have one question where you think his performance has been exceptional. So you say exceptional, and for you, he gets a 5. And Ann thinks his performance has been inadequate, and so she rates it inadequate and he gets a 1. Then his average between the two of you is going to be a 3. And so it would be rated as a 3, and he would be able to see that that from the comments, if you make a comment, he'd be able to get an idea that you think he's done very well and Ann thinks he's done very poorly. And that's, I think that's needed. The city manager needs to have that feedback, I think.
I think where that's wrong, where I think that's ineffective, is that then the city manager does not know what the city council thinks. The city council needs to come to an agreement on what we think collectively. So we need to agree. Either I need to be able to convince Ann that he's exceptional, or she needs to be able to convince me that he's inadequate. But we need to come to a consensus as a council for what that feedback is. Otherwise, effectively, we're not giving him feedback. We're just giving him garbage.
Yeah, I think the consensus concept is one where you discuss that in the meeting, that the council has to go over the numbers and decide because in your situation, that I just described, there would be a ranking of 3. And that may not be good. That may not be a good ranking just because it doesn't adequately express the fact that in one case, somebody thinks you're exceptional, but somebody else thinks you're totally inadequate. So ranking 3 really doesn't adequately address that issue. And so that would be something the council would have to deal with, as part of finalizing the actual evaluation that's going to go to the city manager. And so I think there's an opportunity for that.
And that's basically my point, that the one review he gets should not just simply be a sum of the 7. It should be a thought about, talked about, discussed, and agreed upon result of the 7.
Right. And that's what the process it uses that. It's what it tries to accomplish. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. If he had 6 5s and 1 3, he's still going to wind up with a high 4, almost 5 in the overall average. And what we did for Daryl's, 15 years, 14 years? If council members had a specific comment, those were also listed in the summary evaluation with their initials behind it. So he knew who was making the comments. So the manager needs to know if he's got a problem with one council member. If there's 1 that's unhappy and 6 that are happy, he needs to know who that 1 is. We can't hide that through a consensus of the majority, I wouldn't think. And it's worked out in the past.
It would never be my intention to hide, someone's feedback. It's more so that the feedback has to be consistent from the council. It can't be that he gets mixed signals from the council. I guess that's my point.
Can I make one comment on this from personal experience?
Yes, please go ahead, Matthew.
In my previous town, council members, they put their comments per section, but I didn't know who said them. Officially, I didn't know who said them. That being said, I knew my council members well enough to know exactly who said what. I'll be honest, in my last town, I had one council member that hated the ground that I stood on. Just did. And I could tell his comments every time because they were very different from everybody else. And of course, it skewed things a little bit. Not so much as numbers, but it was just so polar opposite from the rest of the group. And I think it's important if any council member has an issue with anything, any way I do things, I would always like to know. Because again, if you have an issue, I can't correct it if I don't know. So please let me know. But I do like to know who they came from. But I would say I generally know from the comments. Maybe not overnight. I will over time. I know who they came from. But I do like to see, and again, if there's any issue, please let me know. I'd always like to know where I stand.
Councilman Lisa Brainerd Watson, I see you popped in. Glad you were able to make it. Apologize for bad communication on the timing of the meeting.
Oh, no, it's probably my fault and I apologize for being here. And I was here longer than I just wasn't going to go on camera. Sorry about that. Couple of comments. First of all, I do think he needs to see the outliers. So I think if we have, if everybody's pretty much in the 3-4 range and we've got one person who's giving all 5s and someone who's giving all 1s, I think we need to give him those scores so that he sees those scores and especially the comments related to those scores. So I think that it might be helpful rather than just averaging, to give him the range of scores, so that you see that there was 1-1, 1-5, and the rest in the middle at 3, how many 3s, how many 4s, so that he can see that for most of the council, he's fitting the needs and doing well. The other comment that I would make is I wouldn't take anything out of, I like the document as it is right now. I wouldn't pare it down because we may at some point have someone else in here who we would want to have that section of the evaluation in there for. Matthew, I think, is doing a wonderful job. I agree with everybody's comments so far that we probably won't need those, that section. But I think that having to go back in the midst of a time when we have a challenging, maybe we have a city manager who's maybe not performing up to par, and having to, at that point, add that section in to be able to do that would be really awkward and maybe a little bit uncomfortable. So leave it in now and just leave it blank if it doesn't apply.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, I think we have enough information so we can bring something back to the council for approval, adoption at our regular meeting. So then the next item is the section of goals. This is just to give, this is really to give an example of the kinds of things that we've had as goals. These are consistent with the kinds of goals that we've used in the past. Although again, there's probably more of there's more of these goals. And part of the reason I think for that is that we haven't spent enough time getting some of these goals could be grouped into a larger one statement that would cover 2 or 3 individual smaller goals that in terms of how we would present them after we reviewed them through an organized process in the budgeting process. But these are the kinds of things that have been used in the past and I think would be appropriate going forward. And the reason to have them out here is twofold. One is these are the things that Matthew has been focusing on in terms of things that he knows that he needs to get accomplished, as he goes forward. And it gives everyone an opportunity to take a look at the kinds of things that are in here and see if the types of things that we need to cover are here, so that you'll be well prepared when we get time come up to the budget time to actually put together a set of goals for incorporation into the more formal review process in the future. Does all that make sense? Councilman Donahue.
Well, certainly some of these things need to be here, but goals are a working document continually, correct? I mean, especially with what's coming forward for us. So anyway, so this is now, not later.
These are going to change by the time we get to budget time, certainly. Some of these hopefully we will have accomplished them. Some of them may not be completed, like the one we're working with Sun Health on the Loma Hilltop development. That's a goal that's going to take probably several years. It's a very complicated relationship that may evolve with the Hilltop. So some of these will be long-term things that you try to make progress on, and others will be shorter term, for like there's establishing an RFQ for the city judge contract. That's something that probably doesn't rise to the level that you'd even put it on here as far as a goal that you would evaluate the city manager on, as part of the formal evaluation. So there are things that, are being worked on now, but they're not necessarily things that will make it to the goal, to a statement of goals, if you will.
You mind if I make a few comments, sir?
Please, go ahead, Matthew.
Okay. Mayor and Council, just to clarify, so this is the goals you were sent last Thursday. I just make sure all looking at the same document they were sent to you last Thursday via email. I would agree with the mayor. Some of these, honestly, for example, the HR ones, the 4 that you see there, if everything lines up as we're thinking it will, we may very well have those done in March. I know Joe is working on the drug policy currently. The others have been sent for legal review, and we have those back. And I'd like to get those through and let staff know. So some of those may be done fairly soon because there's some issues we need to fix. I'm very much a goal person. For those of you that have met with me in my office, you may have seen my dry erase board. I like to have 3 columns: planning, doing, and done. One of the pleasures of my job is to move things across the board when they're done and mark them off the list. It's satisfying to me when I get things done to mark them off. So I like to have goals, and certainly on some of these, again, wide open to discussion questions if there are any. Some of them are certainly a lot bigger than others. As the mayor said, the RFQ for the judge, that's somewhat of a political conversation, but the actual document is fairly simple. On the other hand, city center infrastructure is a whole lot more complicated. So, and 2, this is a lot of goals, as you may have seen on the evaluation form. I had 6 goals. So we can certainly add more or less.
Comments from the council? All right, we will revisit this goals issue.
Mr.
Oh,
Mayor.
I'm sorry, Councilman Stossel.
Just a couple of thoughts on it. One, I think my thought process when it comes to goals for a city manager is I think in terms of having a small number of very big picture goals. So I would be thinking in terms of having 2 or 3 that were like sort of large overarching, if we're doing it as part of the budgeting process for the next fiscal year, then they're sort of big picture goals where we want to be a year later, what we want the city to look like a year later. I think there's a whole lot of the job that is just sort of ongoing maintenance and just, like the HR stuff is just ongoing maintenance. I would consider the parking in the parks ongoing maintenance of the city. I mean, a whole lot of this stuff is just, I think, ongoing maintenance. I think that the goals we should have should be big picture, year-long time frame type stuff. And they should be, smart goals, simple, measurable, and timely, so that they're goals that we think should be able to be accomplished in the year ahead.
It's a comment. Well, it's a good comment. It's well placed, and that I'm hopeful that it will dramatically add to the substance of our budget setting process if we do that, and actually think about this budget that we're spending, on behalf of our residents. What are we anticipating getting done over the next year or 2 or 3 years, and expressing those adequately in goals, then will give direction to the staff, overall. So I think that will work really well. Okay, any other comments? All right, then the last item for this work study is a discussion of whether we are in a position. It's kind of, we have a potentially 3 different answers to the question of city manager. We've had a little bit over 60 days to take a look at how Matthew has performed as city manager thus far in his interim position. So now we need to decide between either negotiating a full-time position with Matthew as city manager, or having Matthew continue in the interims as an interim for a longer period if the council wanted to have more time to look at him, or having Matthew continue as an interim and going and doing a search. So go through the process of receiving applications from the general public, doing a search where we advertise and go out and try to generate interest in the position, and including allowing Matthew to apply for it. So those are the three choices. I think that we're at a spot that is consistent with what we talked about when we appointed Matthew as the interim. I have had occasion to, spend a significant amount of time with Matthew over the last 60 to 70, 80 days, whatever it's been. And I believe he has done a very good job. He's done on his own initiative. He's taken on projects that really need to be done. And in the past either have just not gotten done for whatever reason. But he has grabbed them by the horns and moved them forward. And I think that's really good. But more importantly, there have been a couple of situations where he has demonstrated to me that he has the right attitude and the right experience and intellect to be a good city manager. And that is the way that that we have worked as a city with the city of Goodyear when it came to the widening of Camelback. That is a very contentious. It was a very contentious issue between the city of Goodyear and the city of Litchfield Park. The Goodyear had spent a lot of time and had hired a consultant to come in and give it advice on the widening and the improvements needed to Camelback. And they had come to the conclusion, their expert and their staff was in favor of widening Camelback to 7 lanes, so 3 lanes in each direction plus a median lane, 7 lanes in each direction from 303 all the way to the Litchfield Road intersection. Widening the road that much was a real problem for us, for Litchfield. It had potentially a very negative impact on the villages, on the Litchfield Greens, and real negative impact on the Greens, a potentially negative impact on a portion of the villages that go along Camelback. And then it also had the potential to disrupt the front of the Sun Health development and change it in ways that Sun Health was not particularly happy with. The Goodyear staff, I think, had gotten MAG on its side. At least MAG was initially willing to be very supportive of making that a 7-lane road. They had taken a lot of the ideas to the city of Glendale, because Glendale has some jurisdiction in that area also. So it was a very complicated mess towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year. Matthew had worked with the city managers from Glendale and Goodyear and got everyone on board, I think, for the idea that the road really should be a 2 lanes in each direction with a median, so 5 lanes total, which is what we had planned for within the city of Litchfield Park. And Matthew did a good job of building support within the staff, and then using various ways of communicating where I was communicating elected official to elected official, so that by the time I got to the city council for consideration, it got through the council fairly easily as a 2-1-2 configuration. So it was a very good, it was a good outcome for Litchfield. I think it's a good outcome, quite frankly, for the region. It's the answer that really should have been gotten to, and I think he did a very good job in doing his part of it, and was operated as a very effectively as our city manager. He also has gotten involved with a contentious issue that's going on between cities and the Chamber of Commerce, and he has represented our city well in terms of the discussions, staff to staff, again, between the cities, and the way that we try to get through this issue with the Chamber of Commerce. Both of those things are, he has done a job that would have been, that I would have judged, I do judge as excellent, for a city manager, for any city manager, much less a brand new city manager, and one that is a young city manager. He's done a very good job. So I personally believe it's that we are at the spot where we would be best served as a city, and it would best serve him as the future city manager and best serve our staff if we would go ahead and make the decision to make the interim position permanent, negotiate a contract with him, and put this decision behind us. But this is absolutely a council decision, so we're here to discuss it and try to answer anybody's questions. We have the ability, if anyone feels we need it, we have the ability to go into executive session. So that's out there. So that as you make comments, if you decide you want to go into executive session, we can discuss that. And if the council agrees, we can go into executive session. And just one final comment before we just break it open discussion. I asked Matthew to send the council a memo that outlined some of the things that he had been working on over these last couple of months. And I did that because everybody on the council has a different amount of exposure to Matthew and a different exposure to the things that are going on within City Hall. I see it probably more closely than many do because I'm in the City Hall at least once a week and oftentimes several times a week. So I have more opportunity to interface with Matthew and with staff and to be able to observe how the thing is working. Others have less interfacing. So I wanted to have some information gotten to you that gave you some idea of the things he's been working on, which I think is important for making this decision on how we want to go forward. So with that, I know I had a question or a comment from Councilman Brainerd Watson. There you go.
Sorry, it takes so long to get unmuted. Thank you, Mayor Schoaf. I just want to say I've had the opportunity to work with Matthew several times up at the Hilltop with regard to the Historical Societies project. We've met out there with regard to infrastructure, talking with different entities about the water and the sewer and locating existing facilities. And it's led to lots of conversations. And just in the process, I've been kind of impressed by the breadth and depth of his knowledge. And I think that he's well placed right now to be able to guide us and work with us through the development of that project and the city center project. And I just, there's what's the old adage about you don't switch a horse in midstream. I think that we've got someone who's seems to have a pretty good handle on what we're doing in some pretty key projects right now. And, it's easy for someone to come in to an interview process and knock our socks off. We all know people who interview super well and, are really impressive. And then once they get on the job, you're like, oh, maybe they weren't quite as good as their interview was. But we've had some experience with Matthew now, and we can see that he's more than just the interview. He has some experience to back up what his resume said he had. And I think he's well positioned to be able to help us and guide us and work with us through these projects. So I think he's a good choice. I would like to see him move into the city manager position. I think that going out to search for anyone right now would only confuse the process and send a message out to the community that we don't necessarily want to at this stage of the game. I think that they would probably interpret that as there's indecisiveness in the council and that maybe we're not 100% behind Matthew. And I think that moving forward shows our confidence. And that would be my suggestion. That's it.
Other comments, Mr. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I've been involved in my career with hiring a dozen or more city managers. you could expect, if you go through the process, that the city will spend thousands of dollars in advertising, city attorney time, staff time, everything else going through that process. We will spend hundreds of man hours going through that process. Each of you council members should expect to have 20, 30, maybe more hours involved in that hiring process if we go that way. Matthew is a known quantity, and as it's been mentioned, I don't care how well somebody interviews, you really have no idea how much self-initiative they'll have to jump in on these issues and to get involved with them and to learn them and to work them. We need somebody with a lot of self-initiative like that. And he's already got some experience in those projects that need that self-initiative, the Sun Health, the Historical Society, the Hilltop, the City Center project. If you go out and you advertise and go through the process of trying to find another city manager, expect that process after the ads are run and the resumes are in and the staff sorts through the resumes and they bring to us the top dozen candidates out of maybe 100 resumes. And we then go through the process of trying to figure out who to interview, maybe do first interviews, do second interviews, debate it ourselves. You're now going to be 3+ months down the road. Once you make that offer to a city manager, if you found one who was really good, who was somewhere working, and they are going to leave their job in good standing, like we would expect them to do with us if they were going to leave, they're going to want to give somewhere up to 2 months worth of notice to get out of that job, to get moved, to get here. Now we're 5 or 6 months down the road where things have slowed down and our projects are moving slowly. And if we have somebody like Matthew, who's already here, who knows the projects, he's a known quantity, we're going to continue going along at what has appeared to me in the last number of months, going along faster than the speed of government. Which I'd like to see. So I would love to see Matthew stay. I mean, and I would hope that we can do something to keep him, because I got a feeling with the exposure that he will have out there, and with showing some initiative and being involved, he'll get other offers. I mean, even Daryl had other offers and never told us about it until after one of the elections was over, because he was afraid how the election was going. Paradise Valley had made him an offer, and he was, had 1 foot halfway out the door. But the election kept him confident, and he stayed. So I would like to see Matthew stay, and I'd like to keep him. I've been impressed so far. You never know in the interview process what you're getting. When you see them on the job, actually working, actually performing, you know what to expect. So I'm leaning toward Matthew.
Councilman Romack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you may know, I live at the Peninsula, or Peninsula Townhouses, and recently we had a meeting with the some of the board of directors here, along with a few of the residents, and it is difficult at best to try to deal with some of these people that have pretty well ingrained attitude and are always figuring that they know best or that we haven't done our homework. And Matthew was at that last meeting, or the meeting that we had, and there was a lot of dissension and a lot of discussion. But Matthew at the end kind of brought it all together, and I think did a very honorable or noble job in trying to keep everybody on an even playing field we don't have a solution yet, but we don't have people shooting each other and any fights in the streets or anything like that. So I would say I'm with everyone or the other speakers here that I think that Matthew is probably the right guy in the position at the right time. Thank you.
Councilman Donahue.
Actually, I just have two quick things. One, I want to praise Matthew on the fact that I don't think he's afraid of conflict. I've worked with him in a couple situations and I've thrown stuff at him and he's not afraid of conflict, which is huge in my opinion. Secondly, my warning, Matthew, you need to stop sending emails at 9:45 on Sunday night. 'Cause I'm a night owl and I send them out and I'd be like, no, turn that email off or your wife and child would be very upset with you. So he even works those hours, which are my hours, but I didn't expect an answer like that. So warning, no Sunday evening. Anyway.
Councilman Stossy.
So, Mr. Mayor, I know I'm a lone voice, and so I won't speak too long. And I don't have any concerns about Matthew. It's just that my experience in hiring is that usually we first define what we're looking for in the role before we go out and hire, because we want to hire someone who's going to fit what our expectations are. And in this particular case, we haven't decided yet what our goals are, and so it's hard to know what the right person is. So, but I know I'm the only one who thinks this way, so I'll shut up and I'll be quiet.
We don't want you to shut up or be quiet because we do value your input. It certainly has, it influences the way the council moves in terms of its overall path. The review that we've done on the description of the city manager to answer some of the questions, at least that you've raised about knowing who it is we're trying to hire. And we're trying to hire someone who can fulfill those job duties that are in that city manager description that we went over tonight. We will learn more from you as we go forward in terms of how we can maybe operate in an even better way. Councilman Clare.
And I just want to reiterate what everyone else has said in regards to working with Matthew. He's been helping me kind of rein in the Chamber of Commerce, which is like herding cats and years of mismanagement, and has done a great job dealing with all the different personalities in the different cities and given some really good advice on how to try and make things happen. So been very happy in the working with him. I appreciate what Tom is saying, Tom Rastosi. I definitely think we need to make sure we have well-defined goals so that Matthew can be successful and the city can be successful. So I think that's a wonderful point. We need to make sure that we have those well-defined so Matthew has a path to work on.
Councilman Donahue.
I also want to confirm that I hear Tom Rastosi and what he's saying. I do think that we have a very unique situation because realistically, in a national search, we'd only be looking for a small percentage of people that are interested in small municipalities. We have a very different, it is different in my opinion, not different job description necessarily, but certainly a very unique situation with small towns versus large, huge towns. So just to say that for Matthew to want to stay and participate in that as Daryl versus going big or bigger, we have a unique thing we're looking for as well to fit that.
Okay, if there are no other comments, this session is an information only session. I'm going to assume that there is either consensus or support for the notion of putting together a contract for Matthew and bringing it back to council at our upcoming meeting this month for discussion of specific terms. And then that contract will go out to everybody for review prior to the meeting. And then we'll see if if we can reach agreement on what the terms of the contract might be. Any other comments or questions?
Sir, if you don't mind.
Yes, Matthew.
Mayor and Council, I just want to thank you for your comments. I appreciate everything that you had to say. And again, just as I've told you before, honestly, I like being in Litchfield Park. I knew what I was doing when I applied for the ACM position. I have family, my in-laws are in Goodyear, and of course we have a little boy. And two, honestly, I'm at an age in my life and in my career where I'd like to stay at one place for a while. And again, that's part of why I'm here. I have a young family. We looked at the schools, we looked at the area. And honestly, I would like to be here for some time. City managers come and go a lot. That's the nature of the business. But two, Litchfield Park has a tradition of keeping city managers for a long time. Of course, Bill retired, so I think that's different. But of course, Daryl was here for a long time. And I would honestly like to be here for a long time if I can. I know as far as bigger cities go, honestly, I don't think I'd want to be in a city where you had 700, 800 employees. I know surrounding cities do. I like to know employees by name personally. I like to know what's going on with them. It gives you a different approach to things. And again, I like this area. It's a beautiful place to be. I think it's a great place to raise a family. Again, it'll be a little expensive for me housing wise, but again, I'd like to be here long term. And I thank you for your comments again. And in the future, any issues you have going on, anything you think I can do better, again, please let me know. I always like the comments. Like I tell staff, if I have a problem with you, I'll let you know. You don't have to worry about it. You always know where I stand with me. And I'd appreciate the same thing with you guys. So again, thank you for all the comments. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, sir.
All right, if there's nothing further from council, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved and seconded by Councilman Clare and Councilman Donahue. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you for giving up an hour and 12 minutes of your evening on this it's Wednesday, I think. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks at our regularly scheduled meeting.